The slap echoed louder than it should have. It wasn't just disrespect. It wasn't just assault. It was the dumbest mistake of his career. Because the woman he just hit? She's not a clerk. She's not a secretary. She's not someone you forget 5 minutes after a meeting ends. She's the most powerful ethics official in the country. And in 4 minutes, she's going to trigger a federal protocol that freezes over $2.7 billion in judicial funding and suspends more than 4,200 public legal officials across 48 states. He thought he slapped a nobody. He just slapped the gatekeeper of the entire system. This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a reckoning. It's the moment the empire begins to crumble from the inside. Tell us where you're watching from. Because this story, it doesn't pull punches. Capitol Building, Austin, Texas. 4th floor, Federal Ethics Chamber. The room wasn't built for spectacle. No wood paneling, no grand seal behind a judge's bench. Just gray carpet, heavy chairs, and federal silence. 12 people were scheduled to be in that room that morning. 1 from each state jurisdiction, 2 from DOJ, and 1 observer from law enforcement, Detective Mason Griggs, Austin PD. He was late. Of course. He stormed in 10 minutes behind schedule, phone still pressed to his ear, barking half orders into it while nodding at no one. The man carried his badge like a blunt weapon. His ego hit the room 2 steps before he did. Althea Ruiz didn't look up from the folders she was organizing. Not yet. She was standing near the back corner in a modest charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, no robe, no title badge. Just a woman organizing briefing materials. Calm, focused, invisible, until she wasn't. Griggs moved toward the water cooler and barked, "You gonna move, or do I have to ask twice?" She glanced at him. "You'll need to wait until roll call opens." He scoffed. "Excuse me?" She said nothing, turned slightly back to the stack of files. That's when it happened. A step forward, a sneer, and then smack. A sharp, open-handed slap across her face. No warning, no hesitation, just contact, clean and ugly. The entire room froze. Someone audibly gasped. A DOJ aide dropped their pen. Griggs stood over her like he expected the room to back him up. "This is why people don't respect these damn panels," he muttered. "Too many little paper pushers thinking they can talk like they got stripes." Althea didn't move, didn't raise a hand to her cheek, didn't flinch. She just turned her head slowly and looked at him. That look, that stillness, did something no one expected. It changed the air in the room. Someone near the door whispered, "Wait, that's not a clerk, is it?" Another replied, "Oh my God, is that—" Too late. Griggs was already muttering, "What? What now? Y'all gonna cry about protocol?" Althea took a slow step forward, then another. Then she spoke, her voice low, resonant, calm enough to scare someone smart. "My name," she said, "is Althea Ruiz." Griggs raised an eyebrow. "Okay. I'm chair of the Federal Judicial Ethics Oversight Committee." Silence. "And the sole final authenticator of the ClearShield Nexus," she added, her gaze locked on him. The air left the room. Literally. Someone at the table actually choked on their coffee. A DOJ officer stood. Another pulled a tablet out like they just realized something was about to go very, very wrong. Griggs frowned. "What the hell is clear? You'll find out in about 3 minutes," she said, already stepping toward the secure black case on the table. "What are you—" "You slapped the wrong woman," Althea said flatly. "And in doing so, you may have just helped me prove everything I've been warning this country about." Griggs laughed once, forced. "You're bluffing." She opened the case, pressed her palm to the sensor. A pulse of blue light blinked once. "Authentication ready," the voice said. "Awaiting master command." Griggs took a step back. "Yo, what is this?" Althea didn't even look at him now. She looked at the DOJ rep across the room, Nolan, mid-40s, wide-eyed. "Nolan, I am initiating ClearCollapse protocol." His mouth dropped. "Ma'am, I have full federal authority," she said. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. "System confirmation, Ruiz Althea Sigma Nexus 01, she said to the panel. "Confirmed. Executing ClearCollapse, all active ClearShield certifications, temporarily revoked." On screens around the room, red banners blinked. Judicial ethics suspension. Active, 4016 officials pending emergency review, 2.7 billion federal funding. Frozen Griggs was pale now. "This is a stunt," he muttered. "You don't have that kind of—" "I do," she said, turning back to him. "And I will no longer let men like you decide what justice should look like." "Men like me?" "The kind who hit women without knowing their name," she said, "and only feel bad when the cameras come on." "You assaulted a federal ethics officer in session under surveillance," Nolan said, stepping forward. "We're live?" someone whispered. "No," another replied. "But ClearShield auto records everything. Redundant layers." Griggs blinked. "Wait, that's not admissible." "It doesn't have to be," Althea said. "It's enough to open federal review on every case you've ever touched." His eyes widened. "You think this is about me?" he hissed. "I'm a damn detective. They'll replace me in 5 minutes." Althea walked closer, stopping just a step away. "No, detective," she said. "This was never about you. You're just the slap that triggered the system." Exactly 4 minutes after the slap, the ripple effects had already begun. 3 states received immediate notices of suspended ethics validation. 10 district courts paused active trials for legal review, and over 4,200 legal officials across 48 states got the same alert. "Your clearance has been revoked pending emergency ethics review. Please stand by for further instruction." In a small house on the east side of Austin, a 15-year-old boy, Mateo Ruiz, checked his phone and saw a message from his aunt. "Get home safe. Don't talk to anyone outside school. I'll explain later." Meanwhile, back in the Capitol building, Griggs was still standing there, unsure whether to scream, run, or beg. Althea turned to Nolan. "I want federal marshals informed. I want the DOJ's ethics branch on this within the hour." Nolan nodded, stunned. "Yes, ma'am." "And get the press ready," she added, "because the moment they find out what just happened in this room—" She looked back at Griggs, who still hadn't moved. "They'll understand something very simple." She leaned in. "You don't touch the firewall. You don't slap the gatekeeper." It was just a cheek, one side of her face slightly red, stinging with heat. But when Althea Ruiz stepped into the women's restroom 2 floors above the ethics chamber, alone, silent, and stared into the mirror, what she saw wasn't redness. It was history. She ran her fingers across her jawline, slow and careful. The skin was tender, but it wasn't the pain that made her stop. It was the familiarity. She'd felt that sting before. Not in this building, not in this title. But years ago, back when her badge didn't open security doors, when her shoes had holes and her mother had taught her how to make bruises disappear before school. Back when the system didn't just ignore people like her, it crushed them. Now, she was the system. And someone just tried to crush her again. Upstairs, the federal response team was already assembling. Nolan from DOJ was making calls like a man trying to keep water from flooding a sinking ship. Staffers were whispering. Aid folders were flying open. Within 5 minutes of the slap, 4 internal agency alerts had been fired off. A regional ethics lock had been issued to Texas judicial funding, and the director of the National Ethics Commission was already en route from D.C. Althea splashed cold water on her face, let it drip, then dried with a paper towel. Her hand trembled for a second. Just one. Then it stilled. She fixed her bun, adjusted her glasses, and left the mirror behind. Back in her secure office, tucked away on the restricted floor, her phone was buzzing. Again, 3 voicemails, one from Internal Affairs, one from the mayor's office, and one from a number she hadn't seen in over a decade. She skipped all 3. She opened her laptop instead and began typing. Subject: ClearCollapse chain activation. To DOJ, Office of Federal Ethics, Internal Judicial Records Unit CC, Chief Oversight Counsel, Clear Shield Nexus. As of 9:46 a.m. CST, I initiated ClearCollapse protocol due to an ethics breach involving direct physical assault during an in-session federal ethics summit. The individual in question, Detective Mason Griggs, badge number 18709, Austin Police Department. Per Clause 7B, protocol activation is now expanding to multi-state validation review. Ethics certifications remain suspended for all flagged roles across 48 jurisdictions. This is not a drill. I am invoking Title 4.3 under Emergency Ethics Oversight. All federal validation holds are now in effect. She hit send. Then she leaned back and exhaled. 15 minutes later, her door opened. It wasn't the DOJ. It wasn't press. It wasn't a crisis team. It was Carter Lang, her chief advisor, her only real friend in the building, former Marine, now ethics analyst, broad-shouldered, quiet, moved like a man who'd seen too much and didn't need to prove anything anymore. He shut the door gently behind him. "They've started spinning it," he said without preamble. "Press? No, internal. Trying to call it an incident, not an assault." She nodded. "That was fast. They want you to de-escalate." She turned her chair slightly. "You want me to?" Carter tilted his head. "I want you to finish what you started." The slap was bad, but the real threat wasn't Griggs. It was what came after. Because systems like this, they don't apologize. They recalibrate. They pretend. And the second they realized who Althea was, the real machine kicked in, not to protect her, but to protect itself. Her inbox began filling with legal soft pedals. Pending clarification of the event. May have been a misidentification. Could jeopardize departmental stability. Carter walked over, dropped a manila folder onto her desk. "Your instincts were right," he said. "Griggs has history." "How bad?" 17 formal complaints, 5 excessive force, 2 internal affairs investigations dropped mid-process, no suspensions, no public record. She opened the folder. "Worse," Carter added. "He was selected as a liaison in a pilot program 2 years ago." She stopped flipping. "Clearwatch?" He nodded. That name again. Clearwatch Security Solutions, a private-public partnership vendor that had won contracts in 6 states to manage digital evidence handling, ethics surveillance, and compliance scoring. The same company that had tried to buy into ClearShield Nexus 18 months ago. The same company that got rejected after Althea found back-channel payments to 3 ethics board members. Griggs wasn't just a bad cop. He was a messenger. "What about Julia Spence?" she asked. Carter paused. "The journalist?" 3 years ago. She was investigating Griggs and Clearwatch. Went missing. "I'll pull her old case." "Don't. It was marked accidental overdose." He frowned. "You think she was silenced?" "I think someone already tried to blow this wide open," she said quietly. "And the system buried her." There was a knock at the door. Not sharp, not aggressive, but heavy. Carter moved first, opened it. 2 people entered. Rosalind Keene, Internal Affairs, and Felix Reyes, DOJ Legal Strike Team. Althea stood. "Agents," Keene offered a nod. "Judge Ruiz, we've reviewed your activation logs," Reyes said, dropping a USB onto the desk. "ClearCollapse was lawfully triggered. DOJ is not challenging it." Althea raised an eyebrow. "Yet." Reyes smirked. "Let's just say the window for backroom deals is closing." Keene sat down. "We came to brief you on what's surfacing. The first wave of suspensions, some of them are screaming." "Good," Althea said. Keene didn't blink. "Bad ones, yes. But there are names caught in the net you may not have seen." She slid over a printed list. Althea scanned it. Stopped. Line 19. Judge Benjamin Halcroft. She froze. "Ben?" she whispered. Reyes looked up. You know him? Althea nodded slowly. He mentored me. Wrote my letter to the circuit bench. Called me the future. Keen's voice softened slightly. He also signed off on 3 ethics waiver contracts that connected back to Clearwatch. One of those cases buried a misconduct report involving Griggs in 2019. Silence. Carter looked at her. What now? She stared down at the name, then lifted her eyes, steady. We go public. Outside, press had already gathered. Microphones were out, cameras warming up. The slap had leaked, but not the protocol, not the 2.7B, not the real story, not yet. Carter checked his watch. You want to script this? No, Althea said. Then she looked out the window at the line of people, law students, clerks, maybe even survivors of cases Griggs had touched. I want to tell the truth, raw. And that's how it began. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with a woman standing in a room built to forget people like her and refusing to let the system do it one more time. There's something terrifying about silence. Not the kind that comes in a courtroom before a verdict or the stillness before a storm, but the silence of an institution scrambling behind closed doors. Because when the system is scared, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It erases. And that's exactly what Althea Ruiz walked into the next morning. The hallways of the Capitol were busier than usual. Phones buzzing, suits pacing, clerks whispering in the corners like children caught cheating on an exam. But no one would look her in the eye. She wasn't wearing her robe, just a black blazer, sharp heels, and that expression, the one her staff had started calling the look before fire. Carter Lang walked beside her, jaw tight, carrying 2 briefcases, one full of files, the other full of names. I don't like how quiet it is, he muttered. That's because it's not quiet, Althea replied. It's choreographed. Meaning someone's trying to smother the fire before it spreads. Inside her secure office, her inbox had tripled overnight. Urgent ethics clarification needed. Request for private settlement discussion. Confidential inquiry. Do you intend to testify publicly? She didn't open a single one. Instead, she walked over to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began writing names. Griggs, R. Nolan, Howcroft, 8A Miles, Clearwatch. By the time she finished, 10 names were on the board. But she wasn't done. Carter placed a folder on her desk. You're going to want to sit down. She didn't. He opened it anyway. 2 new developments, he said. First, Internal Affairs just confirmed. Griggs received federal-level shielding in at least 3 previous excessive force cases. She didn't blink. Which agency? Office of Municipal Justice Oversight. She turned. That's a ghost office. Exactly, Carter said. It's a shell. No real staff, just paperwork and signatures. She stared at the file. And who created it? He hesitated, then flipped the page. Judge Howcroft. The second update came from Keen. She arrived in person, face grim. There's been movement overnight, she said. 4 ADA offices sent quiet emails requesting you step down from the ethics board. On what grounds? Althea asked. Loss of objectivity, Keen replied. Apparently, activating a protocol after being assaulted on federal property makes you too emotional. Althea almost laughed. Almost. But she didn't. Because that was the move. Classic. Label her compromised. Call it bias. Push her out before she got any deeper. She looked Keen dead in the eye. I'm not stepping down. Good, Keen said. Because this next part is worse. She slid over a sealed envelope. From it, Althea pulled a photo. Her nephew, Mateo, taken outside his school, backpack on, walking home, smiling. The photo was dated yesterday. On the back, a message scrawled in sharp black ink. Back off, or he disappears too. Carter's fist clenched. Who sent this? We're tracing it, Keen said. But it was delivered via private courier. No return address. No ID. Althea stared at the photo. Not with fear, but with fury. "I want full surveillance on my family," she said. "Round the clock." "You got it," Carter said without hesitation. "And I want that courier ID'd," she added. "Someone paid for silence. I want to know who." That afternoon, a name surfaced. Lucian Farrow, CEO of ClearWatch Solutions, private contractor, ex-military intelligence, connected to federal data contracts, lobbying networks, and, unsurprisingly, several judicial ethics boards. Keene laid out the files across Althea's table like a puzzle. Farrow's company has ties to 6 of the jurisdictions now flagged under ClearCollapse, she explained. And Griggs was listed as a liaison between ClearWatch and the Austin PD during a now-sealed data-sharing pilot. Carter leaned in. So Griggs wasn't just rogue, he was a pipeline. "A test subject," Althea corrected. And suddenly, the slap made sense. It wasn't random. It wasn't hot-headed. It was the last arrogant act of a man who believed the system would always clean up after him. But this time, he slapped the wrong firewall. That night, Althea didn't go home. She stayed in the office, alone. No TV, no phone calls, no music, just files, names, dates, patterns. At 2:13 a.m., she found the connection. Julia Spence, the investigative journalist who disappeared in 2020, had filed a FOIA request 2 weeks before vanishing. The request? Internal communications between ClearWatch, the Austin Mayor's office, and the Judicial Ethics Commission. That request was denied. But the metadata from the rejection email had been scrubbed, something only someone with access to federal suppression clearance could do. And one of the few people with that level of override? Judge Benjamin Halcroft. By dawn, Althea had a plan. It wasn't just about Griggs anymore. It was about the rot he represented. She drafted a letter, no, a declaration, to the public. You deserve to know what's been buried. You deserve to know why $2.7 billion in judicial funding was frozen. You deserve to know why 4,016 legal officials lost their certifications overnight. This isn't about bias, or politics, or even personal safety anymore. This is about a system built to protect itself at the cost of truth, accountability, and lives. And I will not be silenced. She signed it, stamped it, and handed it to Carter at 7:02 a.m. Send it to every press outlet in the country, she said. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? Let them come, she said. Let them spin. Let them threaten. Then she stood, straightened her jacket, and whispered, I've survived worse than headlines. By the time the letter hit the national press, it was already too late. CNN broke it first, then MSNBC, then a cascade of blue check marks, legal blogs, think tanks, and finally, TikTok. The headline was everywhere. Federal ethics chair declares judicial emergency. Over 4,000 certifications frozen overnight. But it wasn't just the numbers that shocked people. It was the voice. It wasn't the voice of a politician. It wasn't a polished PR statement or vague bureaucratic lingo. It was fire. It was fury. It was personal. She wrote it in blood, someone tweeted. That's not a statement. That's a war cry. And in Washington, panic. Emails were flying. Judges calling judges. Mayors scrambling. Governors holding midnight conference calls. Meanwhile, Althea Ruiz sat calmly at a round table in D.C., preparing for the press conference she knew was coming. She had her binder, she had her facts, and she had the names. Are you ready for this? Carter asked as they prepped in the secure conference room. She glanced over the final list. Griggs is the match, she said. But Halcroft, Farrow, they're the fuel. 6 sitting judges, 3 senior ADA officials, and 2 private contractors, Keene added. Every one of them tied to ClearWatch. Everyone with confirmed ethics breaches, all previously hidden under sealed internal reviews. Althea exhaled. Then we burn the system they thought was invisible. At exactly 10 a.m., she stepped up to the podium. Dozens of cameras, dozens of questions, but she didn't flinch. She spoke like she'd already outlived their opinions. This isn't about a slap. This isn't about one officer. This is about a system that protects itself while targeting the powerless. When I was assaulted in my courtroom, I didn't just feel pain. I saw a flash of every woman, every person of color, every child who'd ever been told to sit down and shut up, while the system looked the other way. Not this time, because I'm not just a judge. I am the final ethics authenticator of the ClearShield Nexus, the system that validates judicial credentials across 48 states. And I pulled the trigger. The room went silent. Over 4,000 legal officials have been placed under ethics review. Their certifications are suspended pending audit. And every jurisdiction that used ClearWatch-linked ethics waivers will undergo a federal integrity investigation, with or without their consent. This is not retaliation. This is accountability. Backstage, someone whispered, "She just flipped the country upside down." And she wasn't done. 3 hours later, Senator Colleen Voss held a press conference calling for a measured investigation into Althea's potential overreach. That night, had to sit down, Colleen trended for 8 hours straight. People didn't want measured. They wanted the house cleaned. They wanted names. And Althea gave them names. The next morning, she released the ethics dossier, 400 pages. Detailed timelines, emails, contracts, screenshots of judicial waivers signed by officials with known ties to ClearWatch. Even internal memos from Judge Halcroft's office, noting strategic suppression of public data disclosures to maintain funding flow. It hit like a bomb, because the public hadn't seen something like this since the Watergate files. Meanwhile, in a quiet office in Chicago, Lucien Farrow, CEO of ClearWatch, was already prepping his press team. "This is a political stunt," he barked. "She's exaggerating everything." But his CFO interrupted him mid-rant. "You might want to see this." She held up her phone. The DOJ just released a statement. "We are launching a joint federal-state investigation into the ethical operations of ClearWatch Solutions and affiliated judicial contractors. Effective immediately, all ongoing data contracts are suspended." Farrow's face dropped. She pulled DOJ? No, the CFO said. She made it impossible for DOJ not to act. Back in D.C., Carter was pacing. "That was a hell of a move," he said. "But you just made enemies out of people who run courts." Althea didn't look up from her files. "They were never running them," she said. "They were staging them." Late that night, Keene returned with another update. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. She handed Althea a USB. On it, a leaked audio file, 32 minutes long. The voice was unmistakable. Judge Halcroft, bragging about how the Ruiz woman is past her prime, how ClearWatch keeps the right ones in power, and how a good slap shuts the mouth. Althea didn't speak. She just played the file again and again, then uploaded it directly to the ethics portal for federal judiciary access. The next day, Halcroft was placed on emergency administrative leave. By noon, 2 ADA officials announced early retirement. By 5 p.m., ClearWatch's stock had dropped 19%, and that was just day 2. The public began calling it the Ruiz collapse. Some called it overreach. Some called it justice. Some called it revenge. But across all the noise, one thing was clear. She wasn't done. Not yet. The Ruiz collapse wasn't just rattling the legal system anymore. It was breaking the silence of the country. But by Friday morning, Althea Ruiz learned something chilling. The system wasn't fighting her back in court. It was coming for her family. At 6:22 a.m., Mateo Ruiz, 19, a freshman at Georgetown, was found unconscious in the parking garage outside his dorm. No broken bones, no signs of robbery. His wallet was still in his jacket, but his phone, crushed. screen down, like someone stepped on it with intention. The call came at 7:08. Althea didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just stared at the kitchen wall, her coffee untouched. "Is he alive?" she asked. "He is," Carter replied on the other end. "But someone wanted us to know they can reach him." By noon, Carter and Keene swept the entire block around the dorm. Security cameras had mysteriously lost footage from 1:13 a.m. to 5:41 a.m. Internal logs wiped. Surveillance backups corrupted. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message, sent with surgical precision. At 4:06 p.m., a plain manila envelope was slid under Althea's front door in Silver Spring. No return address, no markings. Inside, one 4x6 photo. Mateo, lying unconscious on concrete. Time-stamped, crisp. On the back, scrawled in red marker, "You pick your cause or your kin." Althea didn't blink. She slid the photo across the table to Carter. "They're not warning you anymore," Carter said softly. "I know," she replied. "They're trying to rewrite my bloodline." Her father's voice echoed in her memory, whispered on the day she got her first law school acceptance. "They'll try to take your name, mija," he'd said. "But you hold power when you choose what to sacrifice and what to never surrender." She had sacrificed time, privacy, safety, but not her blood. And not now. That evening, Keene traced metadata from the original hospital alert sent to Carter's phone. It wasn't standard dispatch. It was redirected, rerouted through a forgotten subserver from the original EthicsNet pilot system, a system Althea herself helped architect 21 years ago. Keene ran a terminal trace. Source: Courthouse 12B, Office of Judge Marcellus Halcroft. He sent the threat from inside a government building while on paid leave. "They're still running this like a shadow operation," Carter muttered. "And they still think I'll play by their rules," Althea said. The next morning, Carter handed her a folder. "Emergency Ethics Sovereignty Act," he said. "Never been used. But it's real. Congress buried it after 9/11. Gives the federal ethics chair temporary override across all judicial systems when collapse conditions are met." She flipped through the pages, slowly. Lines she had once helped draft were staring back at her like ghosts. "You want me to suspend 48 states' ethics credentials?" she asked. "No," Carter said. "I'm telling you, you already can." Althea didn't respond right away. She opened a bottom drawer in her desk and pulled out an old notebook, leather-worn, edges cracked. Inside were scribbled quotes, diagrams, sketches of alternative court systems, and a phrase circled in red. "A system isn't broken if it works exactly how it was built." They weren't broken. They were corrupt by design. Letting them continue was a betrayal. "I'll authorize the protocol," she said. Meanwhile, far outside D.C., in a private estate in Annapolis, Judge Halcroft was already coordinating the next move with 3 state attorneys and 2 ethics clerks loyal to ClearWatch. Their plan: discredit Althea publicly, file a federal motion questioning her mental stability, cite emotional trauma, increasing paranoia, and call for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation that would suspend her role indefinitely. Wrap suppression in concern. Kill her credibility in the court of public opinion. But Keene was ahead of them. 2 of the lawyers appeared in her ClearWatch crosslink map the week prior, and the metadata trail led right into the cloud server of a private firm called Darren Comms, the PR arm behind 4 recent smear campaigns. She compiled everything, stamped, time-coded, verified, and she didn't send it to Althea. She leaked it to the New York Times. By Sunday morning, the headlines hit. Whistleblower reveals plot to silence federal ethics chair after industry fallout. Social media erupted. They came for her. Blood trended in 4 countries. Within 48 hours, over 80,000 law students signed a petition demanding DOJ protection for Ruiz and full ethics transparency nationwide. Outside her house, flowers began to appear. Candles, signs, not of grief, but of allegiance. That same evening, Mateo woke up. The hospital was quiet. Monitors beeped steadily. Althea sat by his side. His voice was hoarse. "Did they back you down, Tia?" She took his hand gently, but her eyes were steel. "No, mijo," she said. "They reminded me why I started." Monday morning, 6:00 a.m. Althea signed a document and uploaded it to the Ethics Nexus system. Then she opened the override interface and entered her clearance key. A final confirmation popped up. "Are you sure you want to trigger ClearCollapse protocol?" She hit yes, and just like that, the gates slammed shut. ClearWatch systems at 42 federal courts went dark. Audit protocols engaged. Over 3,800 legal officials received automatic suspension notices pending ethics review. Emails froze. Case flow paused. Funding streams halted. The heart of their empire? Paralyzed. Meanwhile, Carter poured her a glass of whiskey at the end of the day. "You just rewrote the system," he said. "No," she answered. "I just gave it a pulse." She walked out onto the porch. The night was silent, but not empty. For the first time in decades, the air didn't smell like fear. It smelled like accountability, and it wasn't done rising yet. Monday morning didn't start with headlines. It started with sirens. By 7:12 a.m., 3 armored black SUVs pulled into ClearWatch's downtown DC headquarters. The FBI's white vans weren't far behind. This wasn't a courtesy call. This was a compliance raid, backed by emergency federal protocol signed just hours earlier by one woman, Althea Ruiz. Inside, executives scrambled to hide devices, encrypt files, delete messages. But the ClearCollapse protocol had already kicked in. The system's own internal fail-safes were reporting on itself, streaming to DOJ live. 42 ethics boards across the country watched it happen in real time. The empire was beginning to eat itself, and it was hungry. By noon, news outlets caught up. Federal Chair Althea Ruiz activates emergency ethics override, freezes 42 courts. ClearWatch raided, $2.7 billion judicial contracts under scrutiny. Hundreds of judges, prosecutors, and officials face suspensions after historic ethics lockdown. And then, one headline set the internet ablaze. Ruiz files subpoena for Sergeant Boone's department, launches criminal probe into judicial abuse network. That one hit like a hammer. Because for the first time, the public understood. This wasn't just about one slap in a courtroom. This was about an entire system of rot. One that had protected people like Sergeant Travis Boone for years. And now, that rot had a name. Althea didn't celebrate. She didn't even smile. Instead, she walked into the Department of Justice, handed over 3 sealed envelopes marked Confidential Emergency Hearing Request, and turned to Carter. "They'll try to stall, pressure Congress, drown us in process," she said. Carter nodded. "They'll fail." "And if they don't?" she asked. "Then they'll be the ones on record, defending a ghost network." He paused, then added, "We're winning, but this is where they swing back." He was right. By 4:40 p.m., Senate Ethics Committee Chair Lamar Godfrey, old guard, bought and sold, appeared on cable news. "This is an overreach," he said. Voice calm but condescending. "We cannot allow one woman to weaponize ethics for personal revenge. Congress will intervene." Althea watched the clip from her office. Then she turned off the TV and said, "Schedule me for Thursday." "Thursday what?" Keene asked. "Testimony. Live. I want every news network in the country watching." Keene blinked. "You want to testify in front of a committee designed to silence you?" Althea's gaze didn't waver. "No. I want to use their microphone to burn down their house." Tuesday was chaos. Emails flooded DOJ servers. ClearWatch's board began resigning. Stock dropped 17% by close. A leaked internal memo revealed an executive calling Althea's actions a controlled demolition. And they were right. By that evening, 3 whistleblowers, 2 paralegals, and 1 ethics analyst stepped forward on national television. We were told to bury complaints, delete them from Clear's shield, reassign judges who failed the ethics score to rural circuits until scores could be padded. I have copies. We knew Boone had priors. Internal notes existed, but the department flagged him as protected L2 clearance. I didn't know what that meant until now. It wasn't just illegal. It was coordinated. Althea didn't rest. She and Keene stayed up mapping every name flagged in the metadata chains. Ethics board directors, city clerks, private contractors linked to the case suppression schemes. Carter brought in security, not for DOJ, for Althea's house. Because around 1:16 a.m., a black sedan circled her block twice. No plates, no headlights. They weren't done threatening her, but now she had a nation watching. Thursday arrived fast. The hearing chamber on Capitol Hill was packed. Media trucks lined the street. Protesters chanted outside. Some called for justice. Others, eerily silent, stood in dark suits, watching, measuring. Inside, Althea walked to the witness table in a charcoal blazer. No makeup, no filter. Just her and a stack of documents. Senator Godfrey cleared his throat. "Chair Ruiz, thank you for appearing. We'll begin with a few—" "No," Althea interrupted, voice steady. "Let's begin with truth." Murmurs. Cameras clicked. Godfrey shifted, clearly annoyed. "This is a formal hearing, and this is a collapsed system. I won't dance in its ashes to your tune." Gasps. Audible. Broadcast live. Althea opened her file. "Senators, what you're seeing today isn't a rebellion. It's a reckoning. You don't need to believe me. Just look at your own records." She held up a chart. Clear Shield Nexus logged 872 ethics violations in 2023 alone. Only 27 were investigated. Of those, 19 were dismissed without review. That's not oversight. That's a cover-up in khakis. Another file. Here are names of 142 officials flagged as high risk on your own ethics dashboard. 31 of them are still serving on active cases. 12 were linked to illegal surveillance. 1 assaulted me in a courtroom. Silence in the chamber. Carter watched from the back, arms folded. The cameras never stopped rolling. This isn't about one cop or one slap. This is about a system that trained itself to protect power, not people. And that system has reached its expiration date. She leaned forward. "And you're going to help me bury it, or you'll be buried alongside it, by your own records, your own silence, your own signatures." Boom. Even Godfrey couldn't find his words. By the time the hearing adjourned, the internet had already declared it the Ruiz Doctrine. That night, Althea returned home to find a letter taped to her door. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten. "We were wrong about you, but we won't stop. TB." She stared at the signature. TB Travis Boone. He hadn't been arrested yet, but he was watching. And the war wasn't over. Not yet. The country now knew his name. Sergeant Travis Boone. And he wasn't hiding anymore. Not behind a badge. Not behind procedure. Not behind his union. No. Travis had gone underground. But he was still watching. He was always watching. 3 days after the Capitol Hill testimony, a video surfaced on an encrypted Telegram channel. It opened with Boone's face, half lit by the dashboard of a running car. No filter, no mask, just a man with a smirk and a .45 resting on the seat beside him. "They think they can erase us, but we built this damn place. She thinks she can shut me down with speeches? Nah, I'm not done yet. Ruiz made a mistake. Now she gets to find out what it costs." The video lasted 42 seconds. The damage lasted far longer. By noon, DHS had flagged Boone as a level 4 domestic threat. The DOJ issued a federal arrest warrant, citing obstruction, intimidation, conspiracy, and direct threats against a federal officer. But Boone had disappeared. He'd torched his apartment in Baltimore, burned out his SIM history, killed his bank cards. He was a trained ex-cop and part of a network that had taught him how to vanish without leaving a shadow. Carter stood in front of the DOJ war room map with Keene. "He's not just fleeing," Carter said. "He's waiting, hunting. The threats aren't performative, they're personal." Keene nodded. "He's not running from Ruiz. He's circling her." At 4:21 p.m. that same day, Althea got into her car after a DOJ panel, only to find a folded napkin tucked under her windshield wiper. She opened it without flinching. "The boy got lucky. You won't, T." It wasn't just intimidation. It was Boone taunting her, again, face to face. Carter's team scoured the garage. No footage, no fingerprints, no tire traces. He knew what he was doing. Althea didn't react the way they expected. She didn't cry. She didn't hide. Instead, she issued a nationwide directive to unseal all ethics redacted case files involving Boone from 2014 to 2023. The result? 87 internal complaints, 12 wrongful arrest claims, 3 missing civilian statements, and 1 open case marked classified, federal clearance only. Keene leaned in. "What the hell is classified federal doing on a local cop?" Althea stared at the screen. Unless he wasn't always just local. And that's when things exploded. Late that night, an anonymous drop hit 5 major newsrooms. Encrypted flash drive, password protected. Inside, a 14-minute audio file. Surveillance recording. 2 voices. One, Travis Boone. The other, Judge Marcellus Howcroft. They were discussing a coordinated ethics suppression network, confirming payouts, false flag evaluations, even direct manipulations of the ClearShield score system. At minute 9:23, Howcroft said, "As long as Ruiz is off the board, the rest of it holds." And Boone replied, "Then maybe it's time I do something permanent." By the next morning, Twitter was on fire. Permanent threat trended globally. Ruiz received federal protection. Her block was closed to public access. Mateo was moved to a private medical rehab facility under DHS oversight. But Althea, she remained calm. She issued no statement. She didn't show up on the news. Instead, she sat at her desk with Carter and said only one sentence. "It's time we move this from criminal to systemic." Carter blinked. "You're thinking Senate?" "No," she said. "I'm thinking international." The very next day, Ruiz contacted the International Judiciary Oversight Alliance, a coalition of ethics councils from Canada, Germany, the UK, and South Africa. She shared the files. Within 36 hours, the alliance released a joint emergency resolution, suspending mutual cooperation with all U.S. court systems flagged under ClearCollapse until a new standard was ratified. Translation? The U.S. lost judicial credibility abroad overnight. Banks halted transfers. 2 extradition agreements were paused. Global trust in the U.S. court system dropped by 41% in a single weekend. The pressure was now global. Back in D.C., Howcroft was subpoenaed. He refused to appear. 2 hours later, he was arrested in his home, pacing barefoot in a silk robe, destroying hard drives with a golf club. The moment his face appeared on national TV in cuffs, Carter turned to Ruiz. "You hit the nerve." "No," she said. "I hit the root." Meanwhile, Boone hadn't vanished completely. He showed up briefly, one last time, in a church parking lot in Pittsburgh, caught on dash cam, walking with a limp, hooded, holding a cardboard sign that read, "The system is dead. Long live the wolves." He vanished before police arrived. But his network? It was falling apart. 5 of Boone's former officers confessed to participating in case tampering. 2 resigned. 1 attempted suicide. The DOJ hotline for ethics complaints received over 40,000 calls in 48 hours. The empire that once protected Boone was eating itself alive, and at the center of the storm, Ruiz remained. Still quiet, still watching, still building something new from the rubble. At 11:57 p.m. that Sunday night, Mateo texted her from his new facility. "You okay?" She replied instantly, "No, but I'm ready." Then, for the first time in days, she closed her laptop, sat on her porch, and exhaled. Because even if Boone wasn't caught yet, the world had seen him for what he was. And Althea Ruiz? She was no longer fighting to survive. She was fighting to redefine justice itself. Althea Ruiz had never been one for spectacle. So when she was invited to the White House for a closed-door meeting with top congressional leaders, she didn't come in fanfare. No entourage, no press team. Just a gray coat, a leather-bound notebook, and 42 years of public service behind her eyes. President Lanning greeted her with a nod and a single sentence. "We can't go back to the old way. What do we build instead?" Althea placed her notebook on the table, then opened it to a page titled National Ethics Charter, Draft 0. Everyone in the room leaned forward. The first item on the charter was bolded. "I, public trust, shall be measured, audited, and enforced in real time. Not reviewed once a year, not buried in reports, live, transparent, public." Althea continued without apology. "The ClearShield Nexus proved something. Not that tech failed us, but that the people behind it did. We're not just patching a system, we're replacing it." Senator Krause leaned in. "You want real-time ethics scoring on judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, anyone making decisions on behalf of the people. And who decides the scores?" Althea didn't blink. "The people." While debates simmered in Washington, the rest of the country was already on fire. 3 more state courts voluntarily paused proceedings, citing compromised ethics logs. A viral petition titled "Rebuild with Ruiz" hit 2.3 million signatures in 48 hours. And in Chicago, where this all began, protesters gathered in front of the Third Circuit Courthouse with banners reading, "She got slapped, now the system's awake." But not everyone was cheering. Inside the walls of Skybridge Consulting, a powerful lobby firm that once quietly shaped court tech contracts, panic was rising. Their entire business model relied on the status quo. And Althea's proposal? It threatened to burn it to the ground. One exec, Gerald Pyle, called an emergency meeting. "We underestimated her. Ruiz has Congress, she has the media, and now she has the public. If we don't move fast, she'll have the damn courts." "How do we stop it?" someone asked. Gerald didn't answer. But across the city, one man still hadn't been found. Travis Boone was hiding in plain sight, changing cars, using burner phones, living in safe houses funded by favors he'd racked up over decades. He wasn't just waiting, he was planning. He knew Ruiz was close to cementing her reforms, and once they were locked in, he'd be nothing but a ghost with a bounty. So he called in one last favor from a contact in a federal clearance office. And by 3:43 a.m., he had her full itinerary for the next 5 days. He knew where she'd be, when, who she was meeting, and the weak points in her security. Meanwhile, back in D.C., Althea stood on the steps of the Supreme Court with 12 co-authors of the Ethics Charter, a team of scholars, former prosecutors, and retired judges, all united under one banner: restore integrity before authority. Live cameras broadcast her speech nationwide. "This isn't about revenge, it's about reform. If we don't measure dignity, we lose it. If we don't audit power, we abuse it. So today, I ask the courts, the states, the people watching, help me make this law, not a lecture." Applause broke out. Not staged, not polite. It was a roar, the kind that didn't fade. But the shadow was growing behind her. That night, an agent in her security detail intercepted a signal from a compromised email, an encrypted message scheduled to trigger at 7:45 a.m. Monday during a press roundtable at Howard University. The message included diagrams, perimeter vulnerabilities, escort protocols. They realized what it meant too late. 7:39 a.m. Althea stepped out of the black SUV in front of the university's law building. She wore a dark red scarf, a gift from Mateo, smiling, calm, until a single figure broke from a crowd across the street. Black hoodie, gray joggers, fast stride, arm reaching inside a jacket. Security moved instantly. 2 drew weapons. 1 shielded Althea. The crowd screamed, but then the figure stopped, dropped to the ground, and screamed, "I'm not him! I'm not Boone! Someone paid me to run, said it was a prank!" Chaos, but no shots fired. No one hurt. Althea stood motionless as agents swarmed. And then, her phone buzzed. A single text. "Nice test run. Let's see how you handle the real one. T." That was the final straw. President Lanning approved the Emergency Ethics Protection Act, elevating ClearCollapse to national security level and authorizing the creation of the Ruiz Standards Bureau, a new federal agency with authority to audit ethics compliance in real time across all branches. Travis Boone became America's most wanted. And Althea Ruiz, she became the face of a movement. On the same day the Bureau was announced, the international judicial community voted unanimously to adopt a transnational ethics index modeled after Ruiz's charter. They called it the Clear Integrity Framework. The U.S. Supreme Court issued a formal statement supporting it, the first such move in decades. Carter stood next to Althea on the balcony of DOJ headquarters, watching the lights of the city below. "You realize what just happened?" he said quietly. "We turned a slap into a signature," she replied. He laughed softly. "And a signature into a standard." But Ruiz wasn't celebrating. She was reviewing data, cases, names, victims, the ones who never got a camera, never got justice, never got anything but silence. "This isn't the end," she told Keene. "It's the first clean page." Keene nodded. "What do we write on it?" Althea answered without looking up. "Accountability, in ink that doesn't fade." The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with silence. For 72 hours, Travis Boone vanished completely. No sightings, no chatter, no burner signals. And that's what made Carter nervous. "He's not hiding," he muttered. "He's loading." Althea said nothing. She stared at the map of judicial reform rollouts nationwide. 5 states had adopted early ClearCollapse protocols. 2 major law schools announced permanent integration of the Ruiz Charter. But none of it felt stable. Because when someone like Boone goes quiet, it's not peace. It's countdown. The countdown ended at 6:17 a.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday in Washington. A scheduled broadcast was set to air Ruiz's keynote from the Bureau's new Ethics Training Center. But instead of Althea's voice, the live stream feed went black. Then flickered back on, with a recorded video from Boone himself. It showed him in a dark warehouse. A wall of shredded court files behind him, a body bag at his feet, and a badge in his hand. "You turned a system into a sideshow, Althea," Boone sneered. "But I'm done hiding behind curtains. You want a reckoning? Let's make it public." The video lasted 92 seconds, but it set off a national ethics crisis that would ripple for years. Immediately, the FBI confirmed the badge in the video belonged to Detective Rachel Harlow, one of the officers who testified against Boone in the sealed corruption case from 2016. Her body was found that same morning in an abandoned parking structure just outside of Baltimore. No fingerprints, no DNA, just a sticky note on her chest. "Your witnesses fall first." Ruiz was moved to an undisclosed secure location by DHS, but she refused to stay there. "I don't lead from a bunker," she told Carter. "You don't lead if you're dead," he snapped. Still, she was relentless and clear. "If he wants the fight to be public, then we take it there, but on our terms." And so began the final push. In the next 36 hours, Althea worked with the Ruiz Bureau to launch the Clear Shield 2.0 initiative, a real-time ethics surveillance module that publicly flagged officers, judges, and clerks whose decisions diverged from integrity protocols. a citizen-powered review panel randomly selected from jury pools to validate ethics breaches. An embedded AI that cross-referenced every ruling with historical bias patterns and flagged outliers for automatic review. It was radical and irreversible. Once deployed, it couldn't be turned off, not without congressional override. "This is your firewall," she said to Carter, "in case I don't make it." Meanwhile, federal agents were closing in. A surveillance team traced an old encrypted IP used in Boone's last drop to a meatpacking plant in West Virginia. The signal was active for only 4 minutes, but it was enough. SWAT moved in at dawn. They expected a dead site. What they found was worse. A control center, 3 screens, satellite relays, gasoline drums, and pinned across the wall, photos of Althea, Carter, Keene, Mateo, red circles, lines, patterns. At the center, a hand-drawn seal with the word reckoning underlined 3 times. That same morning, Ruiz held a press conference. No bodyguards, just a mic, just her. "This man thinks terror can undo reform. He's wrong. And if I fall, this work continues. Not because of me, but because of every person who's been silenced by the very system that called itself justice." The footage went viral. But behind the camera, Carter noticed something strange. A man in a black cap, standing too still, watching too long, not recording, not reacting. Carter whispered to Keene, "Now, move." Agents swarmed. The man bolted. 10 seconds later, he dropped his phone on the plaza tiles. Inside, a video draft, a pre-recorded message labeled, "After she falls." They caught him 3 blocks away. He wasn't Boone, but he was part of the network. And that phone? It contained a blueprint of a planned simultaneous multi-target assault on Ruiz, Carter, 2 federal judges, and the Bureau HQ. Codenamed Final Gavel. Timestamp, 48 hours from now. That night, Ruiz sat in a secure hotel suite. Mateo, now back from rehab, sat across from her. He was thinner, still healing, but his eyes hadn't lost their fire. "Why haven't you stopped?" he asked. Althea smiled softly. "Because you didn't." Mateo nodded, then reached into his coat, pulled out a sealed envelope. "I pulled it from Howcroft's safe house. DHS missed it. It's big." Inside were court logs, sealed transcripts from 2018, showing direct communication between Boone and 3 sitting appellate judges about suppressing evidence, sabotaging internal probes, and bribing review boards to keep Ruiz's ethics ratings low. One name stood out: Judge Robert Niles, currently chair of the Federal Judicial Oversight Council, the same man opposing the Ruiz charter from day one. It all clicked. Boone wasn't just a rogue. He was the enforcer for a deeper cabal. And Niles, he was the brain, the final boss, the one still hiding behind robes and protocols. "Then we don't just expose him," Althea said. "We bury the whole network." In the next 24 hours, Ruiz and Carter delivered sealed evidence to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The committee convened an emergency ethics tribunal, and for the first time in modern history, the chair of the Oversight Council was placed on indefinite suspension pending investigation. The public reaction? Explosive. Thousands gathered outside federal courthouses holding signs that read, "We don't want revenge. We want reform. Ripe the rotten roots. The system slapped Bishop back. We're not flinching." At 9:03 p.m., Boone finally surfaced. A final live stream. His eyes wild, voice cracking. He screamed about betrayal, about systems he built, about a country he no longer recognized. And then, as federal trace agents tracked the signal, silence. They raided a safe house in Delaware. He was there, alive, alone. He didn't resist. He just stared at Althea's photo and whispered, "I was the system, and she ended it." When Carter informed Ruiz of the capture, she didn't smile. She just said, "Now we rebuild, but this time we don't skip the ugly parts." The pen was heavier than it looked. Althea Ruiz stood beneath the skylight of the newly inaugurated Ethics Justice Pavilion, the first of its kind in the country, part courtroom, part public forum, part data center. And today, she was about to sign into law the single most radical shift in judicial governance in U.S. history, the Ruiz Protocol, a comprehensive system that combined real-time ethics scoring for all public judicial officers, public access dashboards for rulings and complaint outcomes, and algorithmic audits that could not be disabled, even by Congress. The entire room was standing. Federal judges, attorneys general, the president, civil rights advocates, even former whistleblowers, once silenced, were now invited to sit in the front row. Carter leaned over. "History's watching." Althea didn't smile. "It's been watching. We're finally listening." She signed, and just like that, the system that once slapped her was now rebuilt in her name. But not everyone cheered. In dark corners of state legislatures and private boardrooms, the protocol was viewed as a threat, an overreach, a ticking clock. Because transparency wasn't just about justice, it was about power. And now, the people had both. That evening, Althea returned to her modest home in Northeast D.C. She made tea, kicked off her shoes. Mateo was sitting on the couch, flipping through a box of old case files. "Want to know what I found?" he asked. She sat beside him. "Surprise me." He pulled out a yellowed, dog-eared file from 1989, one of her first rulings as a junior judge. A kid arrested for stealing groceries, case dismissed. She'd written in her notes, "Poverty is not a crime." Mateo looked up. "You were writing the protocol before you knew it." Althea smiled faintly. "I just hated the sound of a kid crying in chains." Days passed. The protocol rolled out faster than expected. 28 states signed adoption memorandums. 3 federal judges resigned preemptively. The DOJ announced an initiative to reinstate wrongfully disciplined whistleblowers, naming the program Ruiz Reinstatement Act. Carter, now director of the Bureau, asked her to stay on as chief ethics architect. But she hesitated. "It needs new blood," she said. "I was the spark. Let them carry the fire." 1 week later, she gave her final speech in public office. No podium, just a chair, a microphone, a circle of young law students. She said, "When they hit me, I didn't just feel the slap. I felt centuries behind it. And for a moment, I wanted revenge. But revenge is too small. Justice is what you build, not what you break." Silence. Then applause. Then tears. As she stepped down from the stage, one student handed her a small envelope. Inside was a note. In slanted handwriting, it read, "You taught us that a single moment of dignity can take down an empire of cruelty." Althea Ruiz retired quietly. No book tour, no Netflix deal. Just a garden, her family, her faith. And every once in a while, when headlines mentioned the Ruiz Protocol changing lives, she'd shake her head and whisper, "It was never about me." But the world knew better, because after one slap, she didn't just rise, she rebuilt the system that allowed it. And this time, it had no shadows left to hide in. The courtroom was small, no cameras, just warm wood, soft light, and a quiet hum from the wall-mounted ethics monitor. It wasn't just a trial, it was a test. The first case under the fully deployed Ruiz Protocol. Defendant, Kamara Bell, 15 years old. Charge, assaulting a school resource officer. Location, Fulton County Juvenile Court, Georgia. She sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, dressed in a pressed navy blue school uniform. Her braids were neatly pulled back, her eyes steady. Too steady for someone so young. Her public defender, a young black woman named Janelle Owens, stood beside her. Calm, focused, trained in the new system. Behind them, the ethics panel screen glowed faint blue. In the gallery sat civil rights observers, local journalists, 2 members of the DOJ, and, quietly in the back, a retired federal judge named Althea Ruiz, there only to watch. The prosecutor spoke first. Miss Bell tackled Officer Redden, causing him to fall. She refused to comply with his verbal commands and acted with aggression. This is a clear-cut case of violence in a school setting. Kamara didn't blink. Janelle stood. With respect, the video evidence shows that Officer Redden grabbed Kamara from behind without warning, shoved her into a locker, and she instinctively turned and defended herself. The officer was never injured. Kamara had bruises on both wrists. She tapped her tablet. The screen behind the judge updated, Ruiz protocol in motion. It showed Officer Redden's ethics score, 62, flagged yellow. 6 prior excessive force complaints, 3 against minors. No de-escalation training completed since 2019. The screen pulsed. A pop-up. Bias pattern detected, prior history with female students of color. The room held its breath. The judge looked up. She was middle-aged, Latina, and carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many young lives broken before they had a chance to grow. "Does the officer wish to testify?" she asked. The prosecutor paused. "No, Your Honor." The judge leaned back. She didn't smile, but her voice softened. "Miss Bell, stand." Kamara stood slowly. "Do you understand what happened in that hallway?" "Yes, ma'am." "Would you do it again?" Kamara hesitated. Then, "Not the same way. But I'd still stand up for myself. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just didn't want to be shoved." The judge nodded. And then, the monitor dinged. Judge's decision scoring. Within protocol public. Transparent. Uneditable. The verdict. Charges dropped. Record sealed. Officer Redden suspended pending review. Kamara's mother wept. Janelle put a hand on her client's shoulder. Ruiz quietly slipped out the side door. Outside, the air smelled like magnolia and fresh asphalt. Ruiz stood beside the courthouse steps, watching a world she'd helped shape. No fanfare, no reporters, just the murmur of people finally seeing fairness in action. A small voice called out, "Judge Ruiz?" She turned. Kamara stood there, still in uniform. "I saw you in the back. They told me who you were." Ruiz smiled gently. "You did well." Kamara looked down. "I was so scared. But when I saw that screen tell the truth, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy." Ruiz nodded. "You weren't. You were just unheard. Now, you're not alone." Kamara reached into her backpack and pulled out a card she had drawn herself, a sketch of a broken gavel taped back together with gold thread. Below it, "Justice is what you build." That night, back at home, Ruiz hung the card on her fridge. Next to it, a post-it note from Mateo. "You lit the match. Now the next generation's carrying the flame." And somewhere in Georgia, a 15-year-old girl slept in her own bed, record clean, dignity intact. Not because someone saved her, but because a system was finally built to protect her. The press conference was quiet for a change. No shouting, no political jabs, no viral sound bites. Just the slow, steady breath of history turning a page. Althea Ruiz stepped to the podium one last time, not in a robe, not as the chair of any federal committee, but as a woman who had done the impossible and was now choosing to walk away from the stage. Behind her, the seal of the Federal Ethics Committee. To her left, Mateo Carter, newly confirmed as the youngest director of the National Judicial Oversight Office. To her right, a symbolic empty chair, reserved for every voice silenced before Ruiz protocol ever existed. She adjusted the mic. "They asked me what I plan to do next," she began. "I plan to disappear and let the system speak louder than I ever did." A beat. This protocol was never about vengeance. It was about truth, and truth should not need to scream to be heard. The audience didn't erupt in applause. They rose to their feet in silence, because some moments don't need sound to shake the ground beneath them. Later that evening, Mateo knocked gently on her office door. She was boxing up the last of her files, mostly handwritten notes, yellowed case rulings, and old photos from ethics rallies she had joined long before anyone knew her name. "I want to show you something," he said. He handed her a thick folder, a proposal draft. The Carter Ruiz Education Initiative, a nationwide program to teach high schoolers, especially in underserved communities, how to track real-time judicial ethics, file formal complaints, and understand their rights. Althea flipped through the pages. Her eyes softened at the tagline, "Teach the Watchdogs." "You're not wasting time, are you?" she said. Mateo grinned. "You said to carry the fire." She nodded. "Then light more torches." 2 months later. Somewhere in Southside Chicago, a 9th grade student sat in a civics class. Her name was Amari. She had just watched a documentary on the Ruiz Protocol and the slap that started it all. She raised her hand. "Miss?" "Yes, Amari? How come it took so long for people to believe a judge?" The teacher paused. "That's the wrong question, Amari." She smiled gently. "The right one is, why do they have no choice but to believe you now?" In D.C., Ruiz stood in her backyard garden. No cameras, just dirt, sun, and the soft whistle of wind through the leaves. She was planting new roses, a gift from Mateo. They were called Midnight Flame. She paused, brushing soil from her hands, then glanced at the sky, as if asking no one and everyone at once, "Are you watching? Because we didn't just tear down the old. We rebuilt something that refuses to be silent." Back inside, she walked past the fridge. The same card from Kamara was still pinned there. The broken gavel, gold thread, and next to it, a new post-it from Mateo. "This isn't the end. It's just the first honest chapter." And so, as the nation settled into a new rhythm, one where judges were watched, ethics had teeth, and every courthouse had a dashboard flashing red, yellow, or green, people didn't forget how it started. Not with a law, not with a speech, but with a slap. And a woman who refused to let that be the end of her story. It started with a slap. But what came next wasn't rage. It was a system, reborn. So, let us ask you, do you believe a single moment can change the justice system? Would you stand up if it cost you everything? Tell us where you're watching from and what justice means to you in one word. This is Telltales, and we'll see you in the next story.